We're back with another video on the longest and most important battle of the Second World War, the Battle of the Atlantic. In the last episode, we covered the battle from the declaration of war on September 3rd, 1939 to the official entry of the US in December 1941. If you haven't seen that video, we suggest you check it out first. You'd be forgiven for assuming that by January of 1942, the Kriegsmarine had lost the Battle of the Atlantic. Backed up by the Canadians, Free French, Norwegians, and others, the British seemed to have all they needed to protect their convoys from the U-boat attacks. The entry of the US into the war could only have won them the battle faster, right? Wrong. The US Navy entered the Second World War with Admiral Ernest King at its head. Some people believed he was a brilliant naval strategist, and this may be true, but he was also absolutely contemptible. When King wasn't abusing his subordinates, he was dogging the boys by trying to sleep with their wives. Worst of all, he hated the British and refused to listen when they gave him advice. If the US had stayed out of the war, this wouldn't have been a problem, but they didn't, and as U-boats started hunting US ships just off the coast of America, the problem only grew. King was completely unwilling to heed British advice on how to save his ships from German torpedoes. The Kriegsmarine designated it Operation Drumbeat, but they spoke of it as the second happy time. Operation Drumbeat was a devastating Kriegsmarine success. Against the advice of the British and Canadians, King had his anti-submarine patrols organized on a tight schedule. No one dared to question the tough disciplinarian, sticking to the timings like glue. It took the U-boats mere hours to figure out the patrol schedule, and with that information, they simply avoided the patrols. Finding targets at night was easy for the U-boats. Without unenforced blackout, coastal cities shone like beacons, and every time a merchant ship passed between a U-boat and the bright city lights, it cast a silhouette. All the U-boats had to do was shoot at the silhouette and watch the fireworks. The British had warned King of this risk, but he decided not to call for blackouts. City officials were worried that blackouts would lose them tourist dollars, which was more concerning than destroyed ships and dead sailors apparently. The second happy time only lasted until June 1942, a period of 6 months. But over 600 ships and 3 million tons of shipping were lost off the American coastline. King eventually utilized British tactics, but only after trialing them himself and losing thousands of American lives. The second happy time was the last major Kriegsmarine victory. Following the US adoption of tried and tested British and Canadian tactics, the Battle of the Atlantic began shifting in favor of the Allies. In large part, this was due to the up-and-coming RAF Coastal Command. Always the third wheel to the lavishly supplied bomber and fighter commands, Coastal Command spent the first half of the war making do with ineffective weapons and understrength squadrons. Coastal Command's medium-range Avro Ansons and Bristol Blenheims posed a definite threat to U-boats, but couldn't make it far offshore. This created the Mid-Atlantic Gap, a huge section of ocean that Allied aircraft couldn't get to. It was a U-boat playground. This all changed when large numbers of American-made B-24 Liberator planes began arriving in Britain. When stripped of unnecessary gun turrets and loaded up with extra fuel, the Liberator had an immense range. Coastal Command had some successes attacking U-boats in the Bay of Biscay, finally convincing the air marshals of their worth. At first, only a few squadrons received Liberators, but their impact was immediate. The Liberators' range closed the Mid-Atlantic Gap for good, and U-boat losses to aircraft skyrocketed. 30 U-boats were sunk in 1942 and over 100 more were too badly damaged to stay on patrol. It might surprise you, but one of Coastal Command's most potent weapons was a huge spotlight. It was called the Lee Light, and it was strapped to the wings of anti-submarine planes for nighttime use. These aircraft had previously been fitted with rudimentary radar, but U-boats would often disappear from the display when they got too close, leaving the pilots clueless as to where they'd gone. By turning on the immensely powerful Lee light, the pilots could pick out U-boats on the surface and line up a bombing run. Now, you'd think the U-boats would simply dive underwater to avoid the bombs, but it wasn't so easy. Before mid-1943, U-boats traveled submerged during the day to avoid being located and surfaced at night to replenish air and recharge batteries. Liberators with Lee lights effectively stole the cover of night from the Kriegsmarine and forced them to switch their routine around. Surfacing during the day, the U-boats traded knowledge of their location for a chance to shoot the Liberators down with AA guns. This rarely worked. New anti-submarine weapons were also deployed in 1943. One was the Mark 24 Fido mine. Developed by the US Navy, a Fido was an acoustically guided torpedo that could home in on a U-boat using the engine noise. Planes dropped Fidos into the water when a U-boat was spotted and left it to do the rest. The weapon was very successful with a kill rate of 18%. This was almost double the kill rate of a normal bombing run, just for reference. It wasn't just planes that got a new advanced weapons loadout. Ships did too. Many convoy escorts were equipped with Hedgehogs, a set of 24 forward-firing mortars. Once an escort ship had located a U-boat, it charged while plotting the U-boat's position using sonar. When the distance between the vessels was so close that sonar signal was lost, the escort fired the Hedgehog, 24 pressure-activated bombs that landed in a circular shape around the U-boat's location. These bombs only went off if they hit the U-boat, meaning they didn't mess up sonar readings as normal depth charges did. It was a few months before captains were confident that Hedgehogs worked as well as their depth charges. But by mid-1943, hundreds of Hedgehogs had been deployed and experienced captains were using them to full effect, sinking on average one U-boat for every 5 shots. This was far better than the hit rate for standard depth charges, which was 1 in 80. Development of submarine detection and countermeasure tech had been producing results since 1940, but by 1943, several factors started coming together. New technologies had been rolled out across the Allied Atlantic fleets, shipbuilding was reaching a crescendo, and long-range aircraft now dominated the skies. Allied technology was developing at a far greater pace than the Kriegsmarine could handle. Even worse a problem for Germany was the Allied industrial capacity. Allied factories were manufacturing a huge number of long-range aircraft, light aircraft carriers, and convoy escorts. By mid-1943, the Allies had far better technology and far more ships and planes to use it. This culminated in Black May, which marked the defeat of the Kriegsmarine in the Battle of the Atlantic. 41 U-boats, representing 25% of the total U-boat strength at sea at the time, were sunk during May 1943. They were destroyed while attacking convoys by Allied air cover and well-organized escort ships. Dönitz was shocked and ordered the U-boats to withdraw to deal with the losses. The Kriegsmarine would never enter the Atlantic in high numbers again. This devastating blow was the result of a convergence of technologies. All the Allied research and development programs seemed to pay off at the same time as hundreds of new ships and thousands of planes were made available. This combination doomed the U-boat fleet. Dönitz was rocked by the defeat, exclaiming, "The enemy holds every trump card, covering all areas with long-range air patrols and using location methods against which we still have no warning. The enemy knows all our secrets, and we know none of his." The Battle of the Atlantic was a tonnage war, a game governed by brutal mathematics. The Kriegsmarine had to sink Allied ships faster than they could be replaced. By May 1943, the US was launching 3 Liberty-class cargo ships every day. Combined, Britain and the US were manufacturing over 300 planes every day, while Canadian shipyards were completing thousands of repairs. German shipyards were commissioning only 20 new U-boats per month. Even under the best possible conditions, the U-boats just couldn't sink enough Allied ships. Neither could they rapidly replace their losses, with German naval industry being completely outclassed by the combined industrial might of the Allies. By 1943, the Kriegsmarine had lost the tonnage war, but they stayed in the fight right up until Germany's surrender. Even Dönitz suspected he had already lost, but he still sent the Kriegsmarine into the Atlantic, and his sailors battled on against impossible odds. It's estimated that Germany lost 47 warships, 783 submarines, and 30,000 Kriegsmarine sailors and officers during the Battle of the Atlantic. The Allies lost 175 warships, 3,500 merchant ships, 36,200 military sailors, and over 30,000 civilian mariners in the battle. At the end of the war, Rear Admiral Leonard Murray, the Canadian North Atlantic Commander-in-Chief, remarked, "The Battle of the Atlantic was not won by any Navy or Air Force. It was won by the courage, fortitude, and determination of the British and Allied Merchant Navy." That was the incredible story of the Battle of the Atlantic, the most underrated battle of the entire Second World War. But what do you think? At what point do you think the Kriegsmarine lost? Was Dönitz right to keep sending U-boats out even when Germany was being invaded? Do you think the battle could have turned out differently if Coastal Command had what it needed right from the start? Let us know in the comment section below. You know we love reading those comments, so make sure you chuck it down there. And just before you go guys, if you're into history and high quality edited videos, check out our new channel called The Braved, where we go deep into history, not just World War II, but even further beyond, and look at some of the badasses from all these different eras. So if that sounds like it interests you, check it out. It's the first link in the description below. And if you're more into music, we do have our Relax Jack music channel where we use some of the music posted there in the videos on this channel, so you can check that out too. And if you want to join a behind the scenes Discord and get access to some exclusive videos, consider donating to the Patreon. And lastly, if you just want to join our wider community, check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and Discord for exclusive content you won't find on this channel. Anyways guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you learned something new.